The reconstruction zones on Colony Veshar-9 smelled like disinfectant and grief. Dr. Ethan Torres had grown used to it over 6 months of assignment, the way you get used to any constant background noise until it becomes part of the silence. He moved through the medical distribution center with practiced efficiency, cataloging supplies, verifying dosages, trying not to think too hard about the families waiting outside who needed everything and would receive a fraction of what they deserved. The Kelhari plague had burned through 3 settlements in 4 months, killing 30% of the population before human medical intervention finally contained it. Now came the harder part: rebuilding lives, restoring infrastructure, and navigating the complex social aftermath of catastrophe. The Kelhari were proud people, their entire culture built around clan lineage and honor obligations that made human bureaucracy look simple by comparison. Ethan was checking inventory when he heard the commotion at the distribution window. A Kelhari woman stood with a child clutched to her chest, speaking rapidly in her native language to the aid worker behind the barrier. The worker, a young Kelhari male, looked through her as though she were transparent. "Problem?" Ethan asked, moving closer. His human colleague, Sarah Chen, grimaced. "Shadowkin, widow with no male relatives to claim her. They're effectively invisible in Kelhari society. Nobody's obligated to help them. She has a sick child. Doesn't matter. The kid's from a broken lineage now. No clan standing means no resource priority." Ethan watched the woman plead, watched the aid worker maintain that blank expression of willful ignorance, and felt something hot and angry twist in his chest. He'd come to Veshar-9 to escape, to lose himself in work that mattered after 2 years of drifting through life like a ghost. He hadn't come here to watch people suffer because of cultural red tape. He pushed past Sarah and addressed the widow in halting Kelhari. "What does the child need?" The woman's eyes widened. Her ears, slightly shorter and more rounded than typical Kelhari, marking exhaustion or long-term stress, tilted forward in surprise. "Respiratory medicine. The cough won't stop." Ethan pulled up the medical database on his tablet, verified the appropriate medication, and retrieved it from the secured storage himself. The Kelhari aid worker made a sound of protest, but Ethan ignored him, handing the medicine directly to the widow. "Twice daily. If the fever doesn't break in 3 days, come back." She stared at the medication as though he'd handed her a star, then looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you," she whispered in human standard, the words careful and precise. "What's your name?" "Mireva, my daughter is Sella." "I'm Ethan." He smiled at the child, who peeked at him from behind her mother's arm with wide, curious eyes. "She'll be okay." After they left, Sarah cornered him near the supply lockers. "You just undermined 6 months of cultural sensitivity training. Shadowkin don't get special treatment. It disrupts their social structure." "Their social structure is letting children die. It's not our place to judge." Ethan thought about his own son, about the transport accident 3 years ago that had taken both his wife and child in a fraction of a second, about how the grief had hollowed him out until all that remained was the mechanical routine of existing. He looked toward the distribution center entrance, where Mireva had disappeared into the refugee camp beyond. "Maybe it should be," he said quietly. That evening, Ethan found himself walking the outer perimeter of the camp, where temporary shelters gave way to improvised structures on the edge of abandonment. He told himself he was just checking the area, ensuring medical needs were being met in the less trafficked zones. He definitely wasn't looking for a specific widow and her daughter. He found them anyway. Their shelter was barely worthy of the name: scavenged panels leaning against a broken foundation wall, sealed with polymer tape that had seen better days. Through the gap that served as a doorway, he could see Sella lying on a thin mat, her breathing labored but steady. Mireva sat beside her, one hand stroking her daughter's hair with infinite gentleness. Ethan must have made a sound because Mireva turned sharply, her hand moving to something that might have been a weapon before she recognized him. Her defensive posture relaxed slightly. "Dr. Torres." "Just checking on my patient," he gestured to Sella. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Mireva nodded. Ethan crouched beside the child, using his medical scanner to verify her vitals. The medication was working, temperature down, oxygen levels improving. Sella opened her eyes and smiled at him sleepily before drifting back to rest. "She'll recover," Ethan said, standing. "Keep the course." "You did not have to come." Mireva's voice was soft, her human standard improving with each sentence. "You have already shown more kindness than I had right to expect." "Everyone has the right to expect medicine for their sick child." Something flickered in her expression, pain, maybe, or old anger. "Not Shadowkin. We exist between spaces, Dr. Torres. Visible enough to remind others of failure, invisible enough to ignore." Ethan sat on a broken crate outside the shelter entrance, suddenly tired. "That's a hell of a way to treat people." "It is our way." She joined him, keeping the doorway in sight so she could watch Sella. "My husband was a traitor. Good man. The plague took him in 3 days. His clan elders said I should have borne him a son instead of only a daughter. Said the ancestors were displeased. They cast us out. That's not how disease works. I know, you know, they know, but grief needs a target and I was convenient." Her ears tilted back, resignation, his cultural database would have labeled it. "So we become shadows." Easier than admitting the plague was random, that it could have taken any of them. They sat in silence as the colony's artificial night cycle dimmed the lighting. Somewhere in the camp, someone was singing a Kelhari morning song, the melody haunting and strange. Ethan thought about shadow spaces, about existing on the edges of life, about how he'd felt since the accident. "I understand more than you'd think," he said finally. Mireva looked at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes, and Ethan had the uncomfortable sense that she saw more than he intended to reveal. But she didn't press, just nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said again, "for seeing us." Ethan left as the camp settled into uneasy sleep, and something inside him, something he'd thought permanently broken, shifted and stirred like the first movement of spring after an endless winter. The days blurred into weeks, and Ethan found excuses to return to the outer camp with increasing frequency. Sella recovered quickly, her natural resilience aided by proper medicine, and soon she was greeting him with excited chatter in a mix of Kelhari and broken human standard. Mireva remained more guarded, but gradually their conversations deepened beyond medical check-ins into something resembling friendship. He helped them repair the shelter's worst gaps, using supplies he officially requisitioned for structural safety assessments. He brought food from the human commissary when the Kelhari distribution centers continued their strategic blindness. He taught Sella human words, star, friend, home, that made her laugh with delight at their strange sounds. Sarah noticed naturally. "You're getting attached," she said one evening while they processed supply requests. "That's dangerous here. We're not supposed to interfere with internal cultural dynamics. A child having medicine isn't interference. It's basic humanity." "Ethan," Sarah's voice gentled, "I know you lost your family. I know that empty feeling, how it makes you want to fix everything for everyone else. But you can't save these people by adopting strays." The word strays made Ethan's jaw tighten, but he forced himself to breathe through the anger. Sarah meant well. She just didn't understand that he wasn't trying to save anyone. He was trying to remember how to be human again, instead of just a functional collection of medical protocols and grief. That night, Mireva told him about her husband. Jaren had been a route trader, moving between settlements with goods and news. He'd loved stories, would come home with tales from distant colonies that made Sella shriek with laughter. When the plague came, he'd been helping evacuate the sick, and he'd caught it from one of the children he was carrying to safety. "He died a hero," Mireva said quietly, "but his clan didn't care about that. They cared that I hadn't given him a son to carry his name, as if I controlled such things, as if losing him wasn't punishment enough. I'm sorry, The words felt inadequate, they always did. You lost someone, it wasn't a question. I see it in how you look at Sella, like you're remembering someone else. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. My wife and son, transport accident 3 years ago, mechanical failure, the kind that happens once in 10 million flights except it happened on theirs. He swallowed against the familiar tightness in his throat. My son was 6, about Sella's age. He liked stories too. Mireva's hand found his, her touch tentative but warm. I'm sorry, she echoed. That kind of pain. It makes everything else feel distant, doesn't it? Like you're watching life happen to someone else. Yeah, he was surprised by how much he needed someone to understand that. Yeah, exactly like that. They sat together in the growing dark, two people hollowed out by loss, finding something like comfort in shared silence. The crisis came on a morning that started like any other. Ethan was delivering medical supplies to the outer camp when he saw the Kelhari enforcers, official peacekeepers who maintained order in the settlements. 3 of them stood outside Mireva's shelter, their formal armor marking them as clan representatives rather than simple security. Sella clung to her mother's leg while Mireva spoke in rapid Kelhari, her ears flat against her head in a posture Ethan's database labeled as extreme distress. He caught fragments: shadow quarter, proper placement, dishonor to the clan. What's happening? Ethan demanded, pushing through the small crowd that had gathered to watch. One enforcer turned to him, his translator rendering his words in flat, emotionless human standard. Shadowkin relocation. This one and her offspring will be moved to appropriate housing. Appropriate housing. The shadow quarter, where the dishonored reside. Ethan pulled up the colony maps on his tablet. The shadow quarter was a collection of deteriorating structures on the far side of the settlement, barely serviced by utilities, essentially a ghetto. You can't send a child there. Lineage law is not your concern, human. Like hell it isn't. Ethan felt the anger building, the same righteous fury that had driven him to give Mireva medicine in the first place. They're under human medical protection. Your protection has no legal standing in Kelhari clan matters. Ethan looked at Mireva, saw the defeat in her eyes, the way she held Sella like someone preparing for inevitable loss. He thought about his own son, about how desperately he'd wanted to protect him, and how utterly he'd failed. He thought about the last 2 years of empty existence, and the first fragile stirrings of purpose he'd felt since caring for this small, broken family. The words came out before he fully processed them. She's my wife. Sella is my daughter. They're under my protection by human law and clan right. The enforcers froze. The crowd went silent. Mireva stared at him with an expression of absolute shock. And Ethan, his heart hammering, realized he just said something that he couldn't take back, even if he didn't fully understand what it meant. The lead enforcer's ears tilted in confusion. You claim them. Under what authority? Human marriage law, adoption rights, whatever authority I need. Ethan moved to stand between the enforcers and Mireva. They're my family now. Are we done here? After a long, tense moment, the enforcers departed, clearly unwilling to challenge human jurisdiction without clear orders. The crowd dispersed slowly, murmuring in Kelhari. And Ethan stood there, breathing hard, wondering what he'd just set in motion. Mireva touched his arm, her voice barely a whisper. Do you understand what you've done? Honestly, no idea. You invoked the Rite of Renewal. Her eyes were wide, scared, and something else he couldn't name. You just made yourself my husband and Sella's father under Kelhari law. That changes everything. Ethan looked down at Sella, who smiled up at him with complete trust, and felt the broken pieces inside him shift into something that almost resembled wholeness. Good, he said, and meant it. The Rite of Renewal, Ethan learned over the next chaotic 72 hours, was considerably more complicated than he'd anticipated. The ancient law allowed disgraced clan members to restore honor through adoption into another family line, effectively erasing the previous stigma. By claiming Mireva and Sella publicly, and with clear intent, Ethan had technically declared himself a clan patriarch. Despite being human, despite having no understanding of Kelhari succession law, despite the fact that he'd done it all on pure protective instinct. Commander Akoi summoned him to her office within hours of the incident, her expression suggesting she was choosing between disciplinary action and simple exasperation. "Explain to me," she said with forced calm, "why my medical coordinator has just inserted himself into a complex alien inheritance dispute. I was protecting a child. You were interfering with internal Kelhari affairs. We have protocols, Dr. Torres, non-interference directives, cultural sensitivity guidelines. A child was being relocated to substandard housing because her mother's a widow. That's their cultural practice, not our jurisdiction." Akoi rubbed her temples. "And now you've invoked some ancient right that makes you legally responsible for a Kelhari family, which gives you standing in clan succession matters, which has approximately 17 different political factions very interested in your continued existence." Ethan absorbed this. Are they interested in a good way or a bad way? Both, which is worse. Some elders see you as a loophole to insert human influence into their power structures. Others want you dead before you can formally ratify the right. And still others are just offended that a human dared to touch their sacred traditions. She fixed him with a hard stare. "This could destabilize our entire reconstruction effort. I need you to retract the claim." "No, that wasn't a request." "I know," Ethan met her gaze steadily, "but I'm not retracting it. Sella calls me Papa now, Mireva is." He paused, searching for words. "She's given me something I thought I'd lost. I'm not walking away from that because it's politically inconvenient." Akoi was silent for a long moment. "You're really going to throw away your career over this?" "I already lost everything that mattered 3 years ago. My career is just a job, Commander. They're family." The Kelhari response was equally intense. Clan elders from Jaren's family line arrived in formal delegation, demanding audience to address the human presumption. Ethan stood in a hastily arranged meeting chamber with Mireva beside him. She'd refused to let him face them alone, despite his protests. Elder Thesson, patriarch of the Jaren clan, radiated cold fury. "You dare invoke the Rite of Renewal? You, who know nothing of our ways, our blood, our honor. I know your ways let a child suffer because her father died serving others," Ethan replied, keeping his voice level. "If that's honor, I'll take presumption." The chamber erupted in angry murmurs. Another elder, Matriarch Veles, raised her hand for silence. "The rite is ancient law. If properly invoked, it cannot be easily dismissed." She turned to Mireva. "You consent to this bond?" Mireva's ears tilted forward, defiance, Ethan had learned. "I do. Dr. Torres showed honor when my own clan showed none. By your own laws of protection and loyalty, he has proven himself worthy." "He's human," Thesson spat. "He has no lineage, no clan standing. How can he raise a Kelhari child in proper ways?" "He can't," Ethan admitted, and the room went quiet. "I don't know your rituals, your customs, your language beyond basic phrases. I'll make mistakes. I'll probably offend people without meaning to." He looked at Sella, who sat beside Mireva watching everything with wide, serious eyes. "But I'll love her. I'll protect her. I'll give her a home where she's valued, not invisible. Isn't that what matters?" "Love is not enough," Thesson said flatly. "Then what is?" Ethan's frustration finally broke through his careful control. "What ritual, what ceremony, what proof do you need? Because I've spent 2 years barely existing after losing my family, and these 2 people made me remember how to care about living. So tell me what you need, and I'll do it." The elders conferred in rapid Kelhari, their voices low and heated. Finally, Veli spoke. "We will call formal assembly. In 3 days, you will stand before all gathered clans and prove your worthiness to invoke the rite. If you fail, the bond dissolves and Mireva returns to Shadowkin status. And if I succeed, Then you become Kelhari in law, human in blood. Your lineage binds to ours. Your authority becomes real. Velis's expression was unreadable. And your life becomes very complicated, Dr. Torres. That night, alone in his quarters, Ethan finally let the full weight of the situation crash over him. He'd gone from medical coordinator